Before you lies a grim and ironic story in which you will see the Middle Ages not through the lens of fairy tales and heroic legends, but through the eyes of an ordinary tailor. There are no feats, no glittering feasts, no mysterious nights here. There is only hard routine, perpetual filth, cold, sickness, envy, and the endless struggle for survival. This story is not a history lesson, but an immersion into daily life. Life that might lull you to sleep with its monotony, if it were not so excruciating. If you thought the life of a craftsman in the Middle Ages was in any way romantic, you will very soon change your mind. But before you get comfortable, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is for you. I am genuinely curious to see who has joined us. Now, settle in. We are about to begin. You open your eyes to darkness so thick you could almost reach out and slice it with the same knife you use to cut cloth. If only your hands were not already numb. There is no glorious sunrise to greet you. Instead, a thin, acrid chill hangs in the air, crawling through the cracked walls of your wretched little room. The straw mattress beneath you is damp, clammy, and emits a persistent, musty scent of old mold mixed with the less poetic aroma of your own sweat. If you squint through the gloom, you can just make out the uneven outlines of the ceiling beams, each one bowed and sagging from the weight of many years of leaks and rot. You share this delightful abode with another unlucky soul, a snoring apprentice sprawled beside you, arms and legs askew, mouth open in a way that is both unflattering and very effective for catching flies. He smells faintly of stale onions and something worse. Sometimes you wonder if he even bothers to notice the stench, or if he has simply resigned himself, as you have, to the relentless march of smells that dominate your shared existence. You try not to think about the fact that this same corner is where you both work, sleep, eat, and, when necessity calls, relieve yourselves. In the farthest shadowy corner, a battered chamber pot waits, half filled and swarming with eager flies. You try to ignore its presence, just as you ignore the scraping and squeaking of mice in the walls. You can not remember a time when you were not tired or vaguely nauseous from the odors of your own survival. Today, as on every other day, you are up before the first streaks of gray in the sky. Your body has learned to obey the rhythm of necessity, not desire. Your bones ache from the cold and from the stubborn refusal of your straw bedding to provide any comfort at all. You drag yourself upright, wincing as your stiff back protests. There are no soft linens here, no feather pillows, and certainly no luxury of choosing to lie in bed for an extra moment. If you do not move now, the day will slip from your grasp, and with it, any faint hope of earning enough to eat. You reach for your clothes, which are mercifully close at hand, not because you are organized, but because there is nowhere else to put them. Your shirt is little more than a collection of threadbare patches, held together by desperate stitches and luck. The leggings are just as pitiful, and your shoes are a miracle of perseverance and creative mending, their souls flapping like the jaws of a hungry beast with every step. You wonder, not for the first time, how you, a tailor, managed to dress so miserably. The irony is as heavy as the morning air. You stand, stretching and hearing your joints crackle like old parchment. From outside, a rooster crows weakly, more out of habit than conviction. The village is not yet awake, but you can already sense the presence of countless others rising in their own shoddy dwellings, dragging themselves into the eternal monotony of survival. You think briefly of the nobility, slumbering in their feather beds, but the thought is not comforting. Their lives are as distant as fairy tales, their realities as unreachable as the moon. In the semi darkness, you shuffle toward the ashes of last night's fire. A few glowing embers remain, and you kneel to coax them back to life, blowing until your cheeks ache and your breath stings in your lungs. A thin, uncertain flame emerges, casting just enough light to reveal the full scale of the filth around you. Dust motes swirl in the air, highlighted by the flicker. Cobwebs dangle from the low beams, their architects fat and satisfied, unlike you. Your apprentice stirs and groans, muttering something incomprehensible about dreams and missing bread. You prod him with your foot, not unkindly, but with the impatience of one who knows there is no luxury in sleeping past dawn. He grumbles but gets up, rubbing his eyes and yawning so wide you fear his jaw might unhinge. The morning routine is by now as much a part of you as your own skin. Awaken, check the room for any new holes, vermin, or missing belongings, and attempt to collect your thoughts into some semblance of motivation for the coming hours. There are no clocks, no gentle reminders of time passing, just the slow, grinding awareness that the world expects something from you, and you will have to provide it or starve trying. You try to remember when you last woke up without pain, without hunger gnawing at your insides. The memory, if it ever existed, has faded. Your hands are rough and cracked, your fingernails permanently rimmed with the dark grime of endless toil. You scratch absently at a healing wound on your forearm, the result of a clumsy slip with the shears. Blood is a familiar sight to you, yours, your apprentices, or the hapless customers who catch themselves on your pins. There is no comfort in your surroundings, no cheer to greet the day, but there is a kind of grim solidarity here, a mutual endurance. You and your apprentice, and perhaps all the other invisible, forgotten people like you, are bound together by the simple fact of survival. You will rise, you will work, you will eat if you are lucky, and you will collapse again at night, knowing that nothing will be better tomorrow. And yet, you rise. You do not know how many years you will have to live like this. You do not know if you will ever escape this cycle, but for now, the day has begun, and that is enough because you have no choice. You shuffle across the uneven floor, each creak and groan of the ancient wood announcing your steps. The air is sharp and stale, smelling of burnt tallow and a hint of spoiled meat from last week's stew. You look for water to splash on your face, hoping it will bring you awake, or at least make you feel less like you spent the night buried in peat. The only water at hand is in a battered tin pail left over from yesterday's rationed trip to the well. It is murky, floating with bits of straw and possibly a drowned fly. You stare at it, weighing the question: will this water make you cleaner or simply rearrange the dirt? You decide to wash in the most generous sense of the word. Your hands, cracked and sore, dip into the water and you bring a handful to your face. The chill stings, but not as much as the realization that nothing about you is truly clean. You rub your cheeks with a scrap of rag, once white, now the color of old porridge, hoping it will at least remove the worst of the grime. Soap, you think, is for those who can afford to spend their coin on sweet smelling luxury, not for someone whose daily companions are poverty and the omnipresent odor of sweat. If you had soap, perhaps you would not be the subject of whispered jokes at the market. Or maybe the other townsfolk would simply find a new reason to scorn you. Still, you make do. Your hair, an uncertain brown under all the dust, is an unruly mat pressed by nights of tossing. You try to rake your fingers through it and wince when you find a small, scuttling visitor. It falls to the floor with a practiced flick. Head lice are, after all, the most loyal friends of the medieval working class. You do not have a mirror. Mirrors are rare, expensive, and anyway, who would want to look at their reflection when their teeth are more memory than reality? You run your tongue along your gums and note, as always, the wide gaps and jagged stumps. Once you had a full set of teeth. Now, several have gone black and others have disappeared, leaving your smile a lopsided and secret thing. There are some who claim that toothless men are less likely to offend the saints. You wonder if the saints can smell your breath, which is a ripe combination of garlic, stale beer, and what you suspect might be the scent of slow, inevitable decay. You do not brush your teeth. No one you know does. The closest you come to dental hygiene is chewing on the tough crusts of old bread, a ritual that does as much harm as it does good. Sometimes you rub your gums with a twig, but mostly you ignore your mouth as best you can. Toothaches are common, so common you can identify half the village by the way they hold their jaws and wince when speaking. The apprentice, groaning and muttering, rises from his heap of straw. He stretches and immediately scratches his armpit, dislodging another flea. You catch his eye, and he shrugs. You know that by the end of the week, both of you will be scratching at bites so red and angry they seem to pulse with their own primitive life. You cannot recall a day when you did not itch. The two of you perform the morning ritual in silence. The chamber pot is emptied with little ceremony, the contents tossed into the street through a side door with the hope that no one is standing below. The street is already thick with the mixed odors of human waste, manure, and rotting food. You wonder sometimes if anyone in the village has ever smelled a rose, or if the memory of flowers is simply something people invented to comfort themselves. There is no time for lingering. The sun, that ancient clock, is just beginning to paint the sky with a sickly gray. You wrap a strip of cloth around your neck, a poor excuse for a scarf, and stomp your feet in an effort to chase away the cold. You wish not for the first time that you had boots. Your shoes, patched more times than you can count, do little to keep the damp out, and you suspect the holes are growing larger by the day. Breakfast is an afterthought, a matter of necessity rather than pleasure. You retrieve a crust of bread from the shelf, scrape off the worst of the mold, and tear at it with your aching teeth. It is so hard you half wonder if you might lose another tooth, but hunger wins the argument. The apprentice gnaws on his own chunk in silence, occasionally breaking off a piece to toss to the scrawny, yellow eyed cat who watches you from the window ledge. The cat is both a pest and a guardian, her presence at least keeping the worst of the rats at bay. You think of meals and stories, tables groaning under the weight of roast meats, pies, fresh fruit, cheese, and honey. These stories feel like cruel jokes. Your table holds a knife, a needle, a lump of wax, and the stub of a candle. Food is simply another reminder that your life is built on endurance, not pleasure. As you eat, you scan your small, crowded room for anything out of place. You check your tools, such as they are. Your best shears, though dulled from use, are carefully hidden under a pile of rags. You cannot afford to lose them. Without tools, you are nothing but a beggar with dirty hands. The apprentice's needlework from yesterday lies in a crooked pile, and you try not to sigh as you imagine how much time you will spend today undoing his mistakes. There is always so much to do. Today, as every day the work waits for you, piles of torn linen, breeches split at the seams, rough cloth needing to be cut and shaped into something that will hopefully not fall apart before the week is out. The job is endless and mostly thankless. No one admires the tailor's hands, except when they are useful. When your work is invisible, it means you have done it well. The morning chill lingers, biting at your fingers as you gather your courage. You think briefly about what might happen if you simply walked away, left your tools behind, and vanished into the forests. But you know better. There is nowhere to go. The world outside the village is no kinder, and at least here you have the comfort of familiar misery. You sigh, roll your aching shoulders, and set about the daily grind. Another day, another chance to patch together scraps of cloth, dignity, and hope. You wonder if, somewhere, someone is waking up to sunlight and a soft bed, their life a string of gentle mornings. The thought is too ridiculous to entertain for long. You glance at your apprentice, who is already threading a needle with shaking fingers, and you nod. The day has begun, and so have you, imperfect, unwashed, but still here. You brace yourself for the first truly public ordeal of the day, the walk to the well. It is not a long journey, but it is one you dread almost as much as you dread the hunger that would come from failing to make it. Your battered wooden bucket waits by the door, its handle threatening to split at any moment. The inside is stained with old mud, the outside crusted with layers of something best left unnamed. But this bucket is your lifeline, your ticket to the most precious resource of all, water. Stepping out into the street, you are greeted by a symphony of unpleasant sounds. Carts creak by, their axles protesting with every turn. A dog barks somewhere nearby, quickly silenced by a thrown stone. The heavy slap of boots and clogs and mud echoes between leaning timber houses. The air is thick with the stench of last night's chamber pots, mingling with the more permanent perfume of manure and rot. You force yourself to breathe shallowly, focusing instead on the task at hand. You keep your head down as you walk. The streets are not your friend. Every doorway hides the possibility of mockery, every open window a pair of suspicious eyes. Children shout as you pass, sometimes bold enough to throw a clod of dirt or a half rotten turnip in your direction. You ignore them with the practiced apathy of one who has been on the receiving end of far worse. As you approach the village well, you see the gathering crowd. There is never a time when the well stands alone. Water is too important, too rare. By now, a ragged queue has formed, a tapestry of the desperate, the tired, the perpetually aggrieved. Old women clutch their pails, muttering darkly about those who cut the line. Young mothers wrangle sticky faced children. A few men, their faces weathered by sun and worry, stake out positions like wolves guarding a carcass. Each one watches the others, calculating how to get what they need without starting an outright brawl. Of course, outright brawls are not uncommon. You take your place in the line, eyes fixed on the ground. The stone rim of the well is slick with moss and old spills, the surrounding earth churned into a black paste by countless feet. Your boots, well, the sad, battered things you call boots, sink into the muck. The cold seeps up your legs, reminding you that warmth is another luxury for other people. The weight is its own special torment. Each minute crawls by as the line inches forward. You hear snatches of conversation, complaints about husbands, about taxes, about the price of onions, and the rising toll of illness. Someone curses the well keeper for moving too slowly, as if he could force the water to rise any faster. Every now and then, a sharp word is exchanged, or a hand darts out to slap away a would-be interloper. Sometimes, a real fight breaks out, usually over the accusation that someone is taking more than their fair share. Last week, two women nearly drowned each other before the crowd pried them apart. No one remembers now who started it, but everyone remembers the screams. Today, you are lucky. If such a word can be used, the line moves with only minimal violence. When your turn finally comes, you approach the well with the reverence usually reserved for the altar. The well keeper, a sour man with 3 teeth and the patience of a cornered dog, eyes you as if you might try to steal the stones themselves. You nod politely and lower your bucket, listening for the distant splash as it strikes the water below. Drawing up the bucket is no easy task. The rope is rough and splinters your palms. Each crank of the handle feels like a small act of penance, your arms aching as you fight the stubborn weight of water and gravity. When at last your bucket emerges, it is not full. It never is. The well keeper gives you a look that says you should be grateful for what you get. You do not argue. You take what you are given, even as you see the floating bits of dirt, a suspicious film on the surface, and, if you are lucky, no dead insects this time. You take a moment to scan the faces around you. Some are familiar: the old widow who lost her son to fever, the baker's apprentice who sometimes trades a crust of bread for a scrap of mended cloth, the butcher's wife with arms like hams and a temper to match. Others are strangers, travelers or new arrivals, eyes wide with the shock of their lowered circumstances. You wonder what they think of this ritual, the daily struggle just to secure a few mouthfuls of water that will, with luck, not sicken them. As you lift the bucket, its weight threatens to pull your shoulder out of its socket. You clutch it close, careful not to spill a drop. Every drop is precious, more valuable than silver, and you know too well the pain of going without. You remember last summer's drought, the fights, the whispered prayers, the fever that swept through the village and took your neighbor's whole family. You remember the desperate dry ache in your throat, the way your hands shook from thirst. You remember promising yourself you would never complain about muddy water again. On the way back, the bucket seems heavier, the street longer, the jeers and shouts of the villagers somehow sharper. You pass the blacksmith's shop, where the smith's children stare at you with wide, hungry eyes. You pass the tanner's yard, breathing through your mouth to avoid the stink of hides and lye. You dodge a pile of dung, only to step in something worse. The cat from your window appears, winding around your ankles, and you mutter a curse as you nearly trip. The bucket sloshes, and you freeze, heart pounding, until you are sure you have not lost too much. By the time you reach your door, your arms tremble from the strain, your back throbs, and your fingers are so cold they might as well be carved from stone. You set the bucket down with a sigh of relief, only to find your apprentice waiting, holding out his own cup with the hopeful air of a man expecting a miracle. You glare at him, then relent, dipping his cup into the bucket with care. He drinks greedily, wiping his mouth on his sleeve. You do the same, letting the cold, slightly gritty water wash away a fraction of your exhaustion. Inside, the water is divided for its many purposes. Some for drinking, some for washing, some for the soup that will pass for dinner. None of it will be enough. It never is. You catch yourself looking at the bucket, calculating how long it will last, wondering if you should ration it more strictly or risk another trip to the well later in the day. You do not want to go back out if you can help it. There is nothing at the well for you but impatience, suspicion, and the possibility of violence. You return to your work, the ache in your arms, a fresh reminder of the cost of survival. The water, now cloudy with its burdens, waits in the corner like a silent judge. You wonder, as you do every day, how something so simple can become so complicated, so exhausting, so dangerous, but then nothing is simple here. Not for you, not for anyone. And so, with the water fetched, the day can truly begin. Heavier, colder, but at least still moving forward. You sit down at your workbench, or at least what passes for one, a plank of warped wood balanced precariously on two crates. The edge digs into your thighs, but you have learned long ago that comfort is not for the likes of you. You pull your stool closer to the fading embers in the hearth, hoping to borrow a sliver of warmth before the cold of the day seeps all the way to your bones. The air in the workshop is so cold it almost feels damp, a clammy sort of chill that sneaks under your rags and bites you with invisible teeth. Your breath fogs in the air, drifting like a lost spirit before it vanishes into nothing. You flex your fingers and wince. They are stiff, red, and nearly as numb as the old carrots you sometimes find abandoned at the market. Each joint aches, swollen and rough from years of wrestling with thick cloth and crude tools. The skin is broken in places, split from cold and the friction of needle and thread. Some mornings, you find you cannot even make a proper fist until you have worked for a while, forcing blood back into the stubborn tips. Your apprentice is already fumbling with his own pile of rags, eyes still puffy from sleep, a fresh scratch on his cheek, a souvenir from the cat, you suspect. He curses as he tries to thread a needle, his frozen hands clumsy and slow. You resist the urge to snap at him. You remember being that young, that helpless against the elements, convinced that misery was something unique to you. Now you know better. It is not unique, only universal. Your first task is to examine the orders left unfinished from the previous night. There are always too many. A pile of breeches with seams split wide, a stained tunic in need of a new cuff, a doublet so patched and threadbare it seems to be held together only by willpower and filth. All of it must be made serviceable, or at least presentable, by the end of the day. Some pieces belong to villagers barely richer than yourself, their garments little better than yours, heavy with the sweat of years. Others belong to those who call themselves gentlefolk, though their gold is as rare as their manners. The first garment you touch today is a shirt that must once have been white. It is now the color of weak tea, splotched with something brown and stiff, blood, or maybe gravy. You do not want to know. The cloth is so thin in places, it nearly dissolves under your touch, and you sigh as you begin the delicate work of reinforcing the collar. Your needle is blunted, bent from too many encounters with coarse wool and the odd bit of bone. The thread is coarse linen, the cheapest you could buy, and it snaps easily if you pull too hard. You prick your finger on the second stitch. A bead of blood wells up, bright against your grimy skin. You suck at it absently, tasting iron and dirt. The apprentice watches you out of the corner of his eye, and you grunt in warning, "Pay attention, or you'll do the same." He nods, embarrassed, and returns to his mangled attempt at hemming a sleeve. Time passes slowly, marked only by the changing light outside and the increasing ache in your back. The cold is relentless, creeping up through the soles of your feet, numbing your legs, making every movement clumsy. Your breath continues to fog in front of your face, drifting and fading. You lose yourself in the rhythm of the work, needle in, needle out, the tiny, precise movements that are the only proof you have of your skill. You are not an artist, but you are careful and you know how to make old things look almost new. You listen, half aware, to the sounds of the world outside, the clatter of a wagon, the distant shouts of the market, the cawing of crows circling overhead. Inside, it is quieter, the scratch of needle on fabric, the hiss of your apprentice cursing under his breath, the occasional yowl of the cat as it bats at a stray spool of thread. Sometimes you almost imagine you could do this forever, if not for the endless cold and the gnawing hunger in your belly. When the aches in your hands become too much, you set down your work and move to the hearth, such as it is. You feed it a handful of splinters, collected from old crates and scavenged branches, hoping to coax out a bit more warmth. The fire answers with a grudging pop, sending a small cloud of sparks up the chimney. You crouch close, holding your hands above the weak flame, willing sensation to return to your fingers. For a moment, you let yourself imagine what it would be like to have a real fire, one that could heat the whole room and dry your clothes and your bones at once. You imagine thick gloves, a fur-lined coat, a mug of hot wine. Then you remember who you are, and you laugh, a low, humorless sound. No one in your world has time for such fantasies. Your apprentice joins you at the fire, clutching his hands to his chest. He looks at you, hopeful. Will it get warmer soon? He asks, as if you have power over the sun. You shrug, the universal answer of those with nothing else to give. He sighs and returns to his seat, shoulders hunched against the cold. You force yourself back to work. There is no choice. The garments will not mend themselves. The hours blur together. Sometimes your fingers cramp so badly you cannot hold the needle, and you have to shake out your hands, blowing on them until the pain recedes. Sometimes you stitch your own skin to the cloth, and you must rip it free with a muttered curse. Each tiny wound is another reminder that you are alive, that you are needed, if only as a pair of hands in a world that has little use for anything more. At last, the first rays of weak sunlight creep through the cracks in the window shutters. The light does little to warm the room, but it signals that the day is truly underway, that you will soon have visitors and orders and complaints to endure. You survey your progress. 3 shirts patched, a pair of breeches re-hemmed, the beginnings of a new lining for a cloak that will never be truly warm. Your apprentice has managed not to ruin anything beyond repair, which you count as a small victory. You rise, stretching your back, listening to the snap and pop of tired joints. Your stomach grumbles, reminding you that breakfast was barely a memory. You glance at the water bucket, already lower than you would like, and consider how much you can spare for another cup. The apprentice sees your hesitation and looks away, pretending to busy himself with a knot of tangled thread. You do not blame him. Hunger is the one thing you all share. For a moment, you stand in the center of your tiny workshop, surrounded by rags, ashes, and the faintest traces of warmth. Outside, the day waits, cold, unfeeling, and filled with demands. You pick up your needle once more, already steeling yourself for the parade of customers, the endless complaints, the familiar threats of poverty and disease. Your fingers are frozen, your back is sore, your spirit is dull, but still you work because you must. Because in this world, survival is an act of stubbornness, and you have never been more stubborn than you are today. Hunger has a rhythm all its own. It is there when you wake, sharp and insistent, but you have learned to ignore it through the fog of morning routine. It waits as you gather water, as you set the day's first stitches, as you chase sensation back into frozen fingers. Now, with the sun clawing its way higher in the gray sky, and the first real sweat of work beginning to bead at your brow, hunger comes forward, as if to remind you that, for all your other struggles, your body's most basic needs are as relentless as the cold. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is nothing to anticipate. Your apprentice, too, has started to slow, his hands fumbling more than usual, eyes drifting toward the shelf where your pitiful store of food sits. You nod, and he leaps up, eager as a stray dog, but you know there is no reason for excitement. He returns with the bread, a hard, stubby loaf, dense as a cobblestone and almost as old. It was baked, too, maybe 3 days ago, in the village bakery, its better halves long sold to those with more coin and more teeth. The loaf gives under your knife only with a fierce struggle. The crust resists, brittle as pottery, while the center is damp and sour. You carve off a piece for yourself and one for your apprentice, each ragged hunk small enough to disappear in a single mouthful, but large enough to last if chewed with the patience of a monk. He eyes the loaf for a moment, as if hoping it might transform into something softer, something better, but you have both long since given up on miracles. You eat in silence, a silence filled only by the crunch of crust and the slow, deliberate chewing that comes with missing teeth and desperate hope to make it last. Your gums ache with each bite. You have learned to chew on the less painful side, a habit so ingrained you do it without thinking. The apprentice gnaws his bread with the grim determination of a young man still half convinced that hunger is a temporary visitor, not a permanent tenant. No butter, no cheese, no honey, not even a smear of lard or a scraping of salt. These are the things you hear about in the market, in snatches of gossip from those who can afford to complain about such things as bland porridge or tough meat. To you, food is simply a fact, one that runs out, grows stale, molds, and often brings with it as much trouble as comfort. You think of the times you have gotten sick from eating bread, gone truly bad, the days spent hunched over in agony, and still you know you will do it again. Hunger does not wait for discretion. You remember in flashes the meals of your childhood, if meals is not too generous a word, the occasional bowl of thin broth, the rare treat of a roasted onion, the once a year delight of meat so rich it made you feel dizzy. Those were special days, usually holy days, when even the poorest found reason to hope. Now, such feasts seem like something from the tales told by traveling minstrels, meant to comfort children and mock their elders. You cannot recall the last time you ate until you were full or felt the warm satisfaction of food that stayed with you longer than the first pang of digestion. As you eat, you listen to the street outside, the rumble of carts, the clatter of hooves, the rising noise of commerce. Somewhere, someone is selling apples, their voices ringing with the false cheer of those who know most will rot before they are sold. You try to imagine the taste of a fresh apple, tart and sweet, juice running down your chin, and find the memory is fading. You used to steal fruit from the edge of the market when you were young and quick, but you are neither now, and the risk of being caught outweighs the faint promise of sweetness. The apprentice finishes his bread and licks his fingers, chasing crumbs that barely exist. He glances at you, then at the bread, and you shake your head. You must ration what you have, make it last as long as possible. You have learned the art of stretching hunger, of pretending you are less empty than you are, of making do with less and less. It is not a skill anyone teaches, it is one you inherit from those who have survived before you. You look at the bread, what is left of it, and think about how long it must last. There is no promise of more. If business is good, and the villagers remember to pay, perhaps you will visit the market at week's end, buy another loaf, maybe even a turnip or a bit of salt pork. If not, you will make do with what you have, watery soup, a handful of beans, or nothing at all. Hunger is not a visitor. It is your constant companion, sometimes noisy, sometimes sullen, but always present. The cat appears, as if summoned by the scent of bread, though you suspect she knows well enough there is nothing for her. She twines around your ankles, meows once, and looks up at you with eyes that promise violence if ignored. You break off a crumb and toss it her way. She sniffs, unimpressed, but eats it anyway. In the kingdom of the hungry, pride is a luxury no one can afford. Your thoughts drift to other food, the food of dreams, meat pies, roasted fowl, hot broth thick with vegetables. You have seen such things in the hands of the wealthy, glimpsed through windows, or carried past you at feasts where your only role is to repair torn doublets and hope for a scrap left behind. The memory of such bounty is at once a comfort and a curse, proof that the world could be better, and a reminder that it will likely never be so for you. The meal, such as it is, ends quickly. You set aside the knife, wipe your hands on your apron, and return the loaf to its shelf, counting the remaining meals in your head. Your apprentice sighs and resumes his seat, threading a needle with the resignation of one who knows that the next break will be as empty as this one. You feel your stomach rumble again, already hungry, already ready to bargain for more. You know better than to listen to it. Instead, you busy yourself with work, filling the emptiness with labor, stitching hope and frustration into every seam. Hunger is a quiet master, but a master all the same. You have learned to obey it, to live with it, to let it shape the hours of your day. Perhaps one day it will leave you in peace, but you doubt it. In the meantime, you keep moving, keep working, keep living, if this can be called living at all. As the morning drags on, you find yourself thinking of dinner, of what might fill your belly if luck turns your way. You think of soup made from bones and roots, of the rare slab of meat, of the fantasy of cheese or honey. You know you should not waste time on such dreams, but they are as persistent as the hunger that gives them life. The bread sits on its shelf, a silent reminder that survival is not guaranteed, that every meal is borrowed time, that the line between full and starving is thinner than the seam you are mending now. You pick up your needle and return to work, letting hunger fade to a dull ache as you focus on the endless, thankless task ahead. The day is long, the bread is hard, and the work is never done. You have scarcely returned to the rhythmic tedium of needle and thread, your mind lulled by the slow passage of time and the scratch of rough fabric, when the unmistakable sound of approaching boots jolts you from your reverie. The footsteps are heavy, purposeful, with just enough bravado to let you know trouble is coming. Your apprentice glances at you, his hands still for a heartbeat, and you both share the silent, universal prayer of all working folk. Please, not today. The door swings open without a knock. In steps your first customer of the day, a familiar figure dressed in what once might have been considered finery, but now resembles the sad, battered corpse of better days. He is a minor lordling, a man of infinite complaints and finite coin, always ready to wave his noble lineage in your face as if it might compensate for his utter lack of charm or hygiene. His hair is slicked back with animal grease, his boots caked with unmentionable street filth, and his eyes carry the expression of one perpetually dissatisfied with everything he sees. He sweeps into your workshop as though expecting trumpets. You rise, trying to smooth your apron and look deferential, but you know, he knows, there is no disguising your status. You are a tailor, a tradesman, a thing to be tolerated as long as you remain useful and invisible. He brings with him a swirl of cold air and an entourage of unseen companions, the lice and fleas that have set up court beneath his garments. He slaps a bundle of clothing onto your workbench, not caring if he knocks your needlework to the floor. You there, he barks, as if you might have forgotten your own presence. This doublet is a disgrace. The buttons are loose, the sleeves hang like rags, and look, look, there is a stain here that will not come out. Do you call this tailoring? You resist the urge to remind him that this is the third time he has worn the doublet to the pig market since you last repaired it, and that the stain is more likely pig's blood than any fault of your needle. Instead, you bow your head, inspect the damage, and murmur the necessary apologies. You promise it will be better, as always, because anything less would only prolong his presence in your already crowded shop. As you take up the doublet, your fingers brush against the lining and you feel the unmistakable crawling sensation of lice. They are everywhere in this world, on the noble, the peasant, and the holy alike. But there is something particularly galling about repairing clothing that swarms with the living reminders of your own misery. You suppress a shudder and pretend not to notice. To comment would be a grave insult, one that could cost you your pittance of a payment. He paces your cramped workshop, inspecting everything and everyone with a sneer. He remarks on the dampness of the air, the crack in the window, the unbearable stench of tallow and wool. Your apprentice stiffens at each criticism, but you remain silent, biting your tongue until it nearly bleeds. You know how quickly a complaint can become a scandal in the mouth of the wrong customer, and your reputation, such as it is, hangs by a thinner thread than the ones you sew with. After a long list of grievances, he finally produces a coin, a worn, battered piece with more dirt than silver left on its face. He flips it onto the bench as if he is tossing scraps to a starving dog. I expect this to be ready by the morrow. I have important company arranged, and I cannot be seen in rags. You nod, already calculating how little sleep you will get tonight, how much thread you will waste, trying to patch together dignity from scraps. As he turns to go, he pauses, eyes narrowing as he takes in your apprentice. See to it the boy washes his hands before touching my things, he says, with a pointed sniff. You are tempted to tell him that water is not as cheap as his insults, but you only bow again, voice soft with false humility. He finally departs, the door banging behind him, leaving behind a lingering stench and a scattering of fleas that immediately begin their search for new hosts. You and your apprentice exchange glances, neither of you daring to speak until you are sure he is out of earshot. The silence is thick with unspoken curses and bitter laughter. You shake out the doublet, watching as a small cloud of lice drops onto your workbench. You flick them away, cursing the world and your place in it, then set to work. Not all your customers are lords, of course. Some are fellow villagers, farmers' wives with split seams, and shepherds in need of new patches on their trousers. They come with smaller complaints, but also smaller purses. They haggle, plead, sometimes barter when coin is scarce. You take whatever is offered, a wedge of cheese so hard it could break teeth, a handful of dried beans, a promise of eggs that never quite materialize. Each customer brings their own special blend of desperation and entitlement, as if you are responsible for the state of their world as much as their clothing. Some customers come in silence, avoiding your eyes, sliding their garments across the counter as if the act itself is an admission of failure. Others are loud, eager to share every detail of how their child tore his shirt or how their neighbor's wife is rumored to have a better seamstress. You nod and listen, even as your mind drifts to the growing pile of repairs and the dwindling hours of daylight. Worst of all are the customers who believe your skill is a form of magic that you can make an old, moth eaten cloak look new again, or stretch a shirt 2 sizes larger to fit a nephew grown fat on borrowed bread. They are always disappointed, always demanding, always quick to blame you for the inescapable march of time and poverty. Occasionally, you are summoned to the manor for fittings, where you stand in a cold, echoing hall, surrounded by giggling ladies and solemn, glowering men. There, you are invisible, a pair of hands, a bundle of nerves, an interruption to their day. They speak over you, around you, never to you. You pin and measure, careful not to prick their delicate skin, knowing that the smallest misstep could cost you the little work you have. The manor is warmer than your workshop, but it is not a warmth that welcomes. Sometimes your customers bring gifts you do not want, gossip that sours the air, rumors of plague in the next village over, stories of bandits on the road, or worse, word that a new tailor has arrived, younger, with sharper eyes and a lighter touch. You swallow your fear, nod politely, and go back to your stitching, knowing that your position is as precarious as the seams you repair. By the time the Lord's doublet is finished, your hands are numb and your patience is worn thin. You package it carefully, praying that the stains will pass as fashionably weathered and that any surviving fleas will show proper loyalty and remain with their original host. When he returns, he barely glances at your work before snatching it up and tossing another filthy coin on the bench. He departs without a word of thanks. You pocket the coin, knowing it will barely buy you a loaf of bread and a handful of onions. Your apprentice sneezes, scratching his arm, and you notice a new line of red bites rising along his wrist. You sigh, pass him a comb, and tell him to wash, if there is any water left. As you sweep the floor, trying to clear away the day's latest infestation, you wonder how much more dignity you will lose before the week is out. But there is no time for self-pity. More customers are coming, and the work will not wait. You return to your needle, back hunched, shoulders tense, the memory of the Lord's sneer burned into your mind. The world outside continues, uncaring, loud with laughter and sorrow, and the endless complaints of people who believe that their needs are more urgent than yours. You pull your needle through another seam, feeling the prickle of flea bites along your own skin, and remind yourself it could always be worse, and tomorrow it probably will be. There is a particular taste to poverty that never quite leaves your mouth. It is in the dust that settles on your tongue as you work, in the sour aftertaste of yesterday's bread, in the iron tang of a coin you bite, just to see if it is real. If you had to choose, you would say poverty tastes like cold ashes, bitter, gritty, always disappointing. As the day trudges onward, you find yourself counting and recounting what little you possess. You do not own much, no tailor does, but you measure your wealth in things that others barely notice. A thimble that almost fits, a spool of thread only half rotted by damp, a single silver needle you keep hidden away like a relic. Your possessions fit neatly inside a small wooden chest that doubles as your seat and sometimes your pillow. You lock it every night, not out of fear of thieves. What thief would stoop so low? But because it is all you have between you and nakedness. Coin is a rare visitor in your world, never lingering long. The Lord's coins, greasy and battered, will barely last you the week after you pay rent to your landlord, who is always waiting by your door, palm outstretched, face blank as a winter field. Your apprentice's parents send nothing now. They have less than you do. Sometimes you are paid in food if a customer is feeling generous, or more often, desperate to avoid shame in the marketplace. A wedge of cheese so dry it could double as a whetstone, a crust of black bread, an onion already sprouting green. Sometimes not even that. You ration your thread like a miser, always fearing the day the spool will run out before the work is done. Cloth is no easier to come by. You patch together rags, saving the smallest scraps in a worn leather pouch, hoarding them for the day when a customer brings a hole too large for even your optimism. Your needles are few and bent, the eye worn nearly smooth, making threading an exercise in hope and patience. When one finally snaps, and it always does, you bury it under the hearth, as if to hide the evidence of your failing luck. Everything you own is a hand-me-down. Your shirt once belonged to someone else, several someone else's, by the look and smell of it. Your shoes are so full of patches that there is more repair than original leather. Your coat was rescued from a rubbish pile, and then every button is different, a patchwork testament to years of improvisation. The only new thing in your possession is a single length of cheap, itchy wool bought on credit from a trader who eyed you with open suspicion and asked for payment in advance next time. The room you rent is not much of a shelter. The walls are thin, made of wattle and daub, with so many cracks that the wind treats it as a public road. In winter, you stuff rags in the gaps, but they never keep out the worst of the cold. Rain seeps through the roof, puddling under your bed, making everything damp and faintly moldy. Sometimes you think you hear the walls sigh at night, tired from holding back the world's endless hunger. The food, such as it is always the same. You know how to stretch a soup to feed two on nothing but water, a turnip, and a whisper of lard. On lucky days, a customer might give you a scrap of meat, usually fat and gristle, or the odd bone, more promise than meal. On unlucky days, you eat nothing, pretending you are simply too busy to stop. You have learned the art of making hunger a companion, not an enemy. Every week, there is something else you cannot afford. New thread, new tools, rent, food, taxes, always taxes. The village collector comes with a ledger and an air of apology, as if your poverty is an inconvenience to him personally. He lists your debts, toots at your empty purse, and takes what he can. A button, a length of cloth, sometimes a promise you know you cannot keep. The Lord takes his cut as well for the privilege of working in his village, using his roads, breathing his air. You pay because there is no other choice. Your apprentice fares no better. He dreams of someday becoming a master tailor, but his dreams are patched as thin as your sleeves. His mother sends him scraps from her own kitchen when she can, but more often than not, he eats what you do, which is to say, not enough. He wears the same shirt week after week, washing it only when the smell becomes unbearable, then shivering for days as it dries in the smoky corner of the workshop. Poverty is not just the lack of money or things. It is a weariness that settles into your bones, a sense that every day is spent catching up to a world that is always 3 steps ahead. It is knowing that no matter how hard you work, you will always be behind, always be found wanting. It is the humiliation of standing in the market, empty purse in hand, watching others walk away with fresh bread and sweet apples while you turn over the bruised and the half rotten, pretending you have a choice. There are days you envy even the beggars, whose hunger is at least honest, their desperation open for all to see. You, on the other hand, must pretend to be grateful, pretend to be content, pretend that tomorrow will be better when you know, with the certainty of a stone, that it will be just the same. Yet you survive, not because you are stronger or wiser, but because you have no other option. You mend and patch, barter and beg, scrape by on what others throw away. Each day you add another layer to the armor of poverty, a thicker skin, a sharper tongue, a quiet resignation. You dream sometimes of something better, but those dreams are like everything else in your life, secondhand, patched together, and always just out of reach. As evening comes, you light the last stub of your candle and count your coins once more, already knowing there will not be enough. The world outside your door is dark, indifferent, full of people who have never had to count the cost of every scrap of bread or every hour of daylight. You stare at the guttering flame and wonder what it would be like to want for nothing, to have enough just once to buy a loaf of bread without haggling, to sew a shirt with new cloth and not worry about where your next needle will come from. But wanting is a luxury, and you, poor tailor, are rich only in want. The world believes that a tailor's life is one of gentle industry and quiet pride, a craftsman at peace, seated in the calm of his shop, plying his trade by the window's sunlight, humming a pleasant tune, while deft fingers transform humble cloth into works of art. The reality, of course, is that the sun rarely shines where you work. Your fingers are as likely to bleed as to dance, and the only tune you hum is the flat, monotonous drone of exhaustion. Your trade, for all its supposed respectability, is mostly a fight with the materials at hand, materials that have, by the time they reach you, been through more trials than most men survive in a lifetime. The cloth that enters your workshop is never new. New cloth is for the Lord's children, for the priests and wealthy merchants who order entire bolts from the far corners of the world. What you see is cast off, worn thin by years of use, or so full of holes and stains that even the most optimistic wife in the village cannot salvage it at home. You sort through a pile of this week's requests: a tunic torn along the shoulder, a pair of breeches with knees worn to lace, a shawl so frayed the only thing holding it together is the will of its owner. Your hands, raw and cracked, gently turn the garments, searching for strength where there is none. Some jobs you can fix, at least enough to be passable under the poor light of a candle. Others are beyond even your limited magic, but you take them anyway, because what else is there to do? Turn work away, and the work will stop coming. Today, you reach for your shears, the faithful companions of your trade. Once, long ago, they were a tailor's pride, sharp, strong, and true. Now, after years of hard use, they barely cut. The blades have dulled and chipped, the hinges loose, and every squeeze of the handles brings a new creak and groan. There is no hope of a new pair. You have tried to sharpen them on stones, on bricks, even once on the doorstep, to the great annoyance of your landlord. The results are always temporary. You have learned to accept their flaws, just as you have accepted your own. Cutting with blunt shears is a test of patience and endurance. The blades catch and tear, snagging the cloth, leaving ragged edges that must then be hidden by extra stitches, more thread, more labor. You press down hard, wincing as the handles bite into the bruised flesh between your thumb and forefinger. The sound they make is a kind of sad complaint, a whine, a sigh, a plea for mercy. You mutter your own curses in response, but the work must be done. Even when the cloth itself is not falling apart, you must contend with the stains and smells it brings. Old sweat, spilled ale, the unmistakable musk of livestock and poverty. Sometimes the garments are so stiff with filth, you have to beat them with a stick before you dare put needle to fabric, or else risk your needle bending, your thread breaking, and your patience deserting you entirely. The rich complain about a speck of mud or a crease in their finery. You have seen stains that have outlasted their owners. The thread you use is another enemy, thick, coarse, and eager to unravel at the worst possible moment. If you pull too tight, it snaps, too loose, and your patch will not hold. The eye of your favorite needle has grown so small that even the sharpest eyes in the village would struggle to guide the thread through it. You squint in the gray light, tongue clamped between your teeth, praying for luck more than skill. As you work, you are always aware that the smallest mistake can undo an hour's labor. A careless slip, and your shears will slice too far, a tug too hard, and the seam will pucker. A moment's distraction, and you will stitch a fold into the wrong place. Customers may not notice the extra work, but they will certainly notice a botched repair, and they will not hesitate to mention it loudly and to anyone who will listen. Your apprentice struggles beside you, fingers clumsy and untrained. He curses as his thread snaps again, leaving him staring in disbelief at the ruined hem. You bite back your own frustration. There is no time to teach patience, only to demand it. You show him, for the 100th time, how to tie the knot, how to guide the needle through the fabric's tired flesh. He nods, but his hands tremble with the knowledge that one wrong move will earn a scolding, or worse, cost him his place. Sometimes, in rare moments when you are alone, you remember what it was like to work with good cloth, smooth, strong, and forgiving. You remember the joy of making something beautiful, something new. But that was another life, another world. Here, beauty is a luxury, and your job is not to create, but to survive. The garments you make are not meant to last. They are only meant to last a little longer. Every day, the pile of work grows higher, and your tools grow duller. Every day, you mend the same holes, patch the same knees, darn the same socks, knowing they will be back again before long, torn anew by the merciless world outside your shop. It is a Sisyphean labor, endless, repetitive, and without reward. You are not a master of your craft, you are its prisoner. In the evenings, you count your bandaged fingers, each cut and bruise a mark of the day's struggles. You stare at your shears, wondering how much longer they will last, how much longer you will last. There is always one more garment, one more patch, one more repair that cannot wait. The village talks of tailors as clever and nimble, but no one speaks of the constant war against rotten cloth, bent needles, and tools that would rather maim than serve. No one sees the piles of ruined thread, the baskets of hopeless scraps, the moments of quiet despair when the work is too much and the reward too little. They see only the finished seam, never the hands that bled to make it. You sigh, shake out your aching hands, and return to your work. The cloth is torn, your shears are blunt, but there is no time for pity. The world does not care how hard you fight to hold it together. It only cares that you do not let it fall apart. There is an illusion carefully maintained by those who write histories and paint romantic scenes that a craftsman's world is one of order, shining tools, and neatly folded cloth. You wish it were so. The truth is, filth is not simply a part of your life as a tailor. It is the ever present backdrop, the silent, suffocating blanket that covers everything and everyone, no matter how much you scrape and sweep. Your workshop, if it can even be dignified with such a word, is never clean, not for lack of effort, but because the filth is older than you, older than your landlord, older than the village itself. You sweep the floor each morning, or at least push the worst of the dirt into the corners, but by midday, the dust has returned, rising in gray clouds whenever you drop a tunic or stamp your foot in frustration. It clings to every surface, every thread, every ragged cuff. It weaves itself into the cloth you sew, nestles in the creases of your hands, and settles in your lungs. You cough more than you used to, though you pretend not to notice. The air inside is thick with dust and old smoke, stirred by every draft and the restless shifting of the apprentice. Light, when it does find a way in, slants through the cracks and dances in the haze, turning even a sunbeam into a tapestry of suspended filth. Cobwebs hang from every corner, some abandoned, some still alive with industrious spiders. You do not bother them, spiders at least, keep the flies in check. The filth is everywhere, not just in the air. Every surface bears the evidence of years of hard living. The pitted, stained table where you cut cloth and eat your meals. The battered chest where you keep your rare treasures and your even rarer coins. The hearth black with old soot and scattered with bits of charred wood. Your stool is sticky with old wax and spilled broth, and you have long stopped caring if it is safe to sit on it in your best shirt, though best is a term with little meaning these days. Even your tools have not escaped. Needles are sticky with resin from last year's repairs, scissors stained with rust and whatever passed for oil when you last tried to clean them, thread tangles with bits of straw, and the spool rolls through dust, picking up every crumb in its path. The apprentice's attempts at order only make things worse, his nervous tidying sending buttons, pins, and scraps of cloth scattering into the deepest shadows. You have found things under your workbench that you do not recognize and have no wish to identify. The floor is a story in itself. Under the packed dirt lies a layer of straw, then dust, then the remains of meals eaten and forgotten, crumbs, bones, the occasional fish spine or beetle shell. In the cold months, when your feet go numb and you shuffle rather than walk, you swear the floor has gained another inch of filth, pressed down by centuries of men too poor or too tired to care. Rats and mice have worn paths along the baseboards, and sometimes you catch a glimpse of one, sleek, bold, unafraid of your curses or your cat, who spends her days napping rather than hunting. You have learned to ignore the worst of it. There is no soap, not really. What little there is must be saved for the rare customer who truly pays, or for the days when the stink becomes so thick you cannot breathe. Your hands are never truly clean. The lines in your palms are black. Your fingernails a map of every garment you have mended, every meal you have stretched. Your skin carries the scent of smoke, sweat, grease, and something indefinable, poverty perhaps, or simply resignation. Your clothes, patched and repatched, carry their own burden of filth. You wash them in cold water when you can spare it, beating them against rocks at the village stream, but the stains never leave. The cuffs are always stiff, the collars always gray, and there is a sourness in the fabric that no amount of scrubbing will lift. On damp days, the smell grows worse, as if the very walls are sweating out centuries of old misery. The filth is not only a matter of dirt, it is a creeping, living thing, an ecosystem that includes lice, fleas, mites, and worse. You wake in the night to the itching of fresh bites, the knowledge that you share your bed with legions of unseen guests. Your apprentice scratches his scalp until it bleeds, and you pretend not to notice because you are too busy fighting your own battles against the tiny armies that claim your flesh as their own. Sometimes a customer complains, wrinkling their nose as they step over the threshold. How can a man work in such conditions? They ask, as if the answer is not carved into the walls, spelled out in the mildew that crawls up from the floor. You want to tell them that filth is the water in which you swim, the air you breathe, the currency of your life. Instead, you nod and apologize, promising to clean, to improve, to become something other than what you are. It is a lie, but it is one everyone tells, so you do not feel much guilt. You have learned to spot the signs of new infestations, the telltale droppings behind the chest, the faint scuttle in the straw, the musty sweetness that means mold is winning the endless war against your efforts. The village doctor, when he can be bothered to visit, shakes his head and mutters about bad air and humors as if opening a window or burning another stick of rosemary would change anything. You know better. The filth is not a problem to be solved, but a companion to be endured. Even meals taste of it. You pick grit from your teeth after every bite, spit out bits of straw that have drifted into the pot. The water is always cloudy. The bread always carries a dusting of something that might be flour, but more likely is not. On rare occasions, you catch yourself dreaming of cleanliness, not just an absence of dirt, but a world where your lungs are clear, your hands white, your clothes bright. Then you wake, the dream dissolving like all the others, replaced by the ever present haze. In moments of bitter humor, you think perhaps the filth is all that truly belongs to you. Money, food, even work come and go, but the grime never leaves. It is as loyal as a shadow, as constant as the ache in your back. You might change your trade, your town, your very name, but the filth would follow, clinging to you as surely as your own skin. And so you work on, needle in hand, breath catching in your throat, eyes stinging from the smoke and the dust. Filth, you have learned, is not something to be fought, but something to be lived with. It is the fabric from which your entire world is cut, and no amount of mending will ever make it clean. In the tales told by wandering bards, society is a grand tapestry, each person a vibrant thread woven into the fabric of the community with purpose and dignity. But you, after a lifetime at the loom's bottom, know the truth. Some threads are trampled beneath muddy boots, while others glitter on the surface. In the grand pattern of medieval life, you, the tailor, are the faintest stitch, nearly invisible, more patch than pattern, and always underfoot. You learned this early. As a child, your mother would push you aside when the Lord's men came riding through the street. Out of the way, she'd hiss, pulling you into the shadows as hoofbeats thundered past. You are not meant to be seen. You never forgot the lesson. You have lived your entire life on the margins, the tailor's place defined by what you are not. Not noble, not a farmer with land, not a priest, not even a merchant with a real stall in the market. You are the space between, the one who mends, who serves, who is seen only when needed and forgotten the moment you are done. The social ladder is built of rotting wood, its rungs slick with mud and blood, and you have never set foot on anything but the bottommost bar. Above you is everyone else, it seems. The Lord and his family, preening in silk and fur, their hands soft, their words hard. The priest, belly full and fingers fat with rings, who blesses the village from a safe distance, but recoils from your dirty touch. Even the merchants, with their greasy smiles and sharp elbows, look down on you from their stalls, wagging fingers if you dare haggle too hard. You are a tailor, yes, but not the kind that is fawned over in the courts. You patch peasants' tunics and farm wives' aprons, not doublets for dukes or gowns for queens. If you vanished tomorrow, life in the village would stumble for a day or two, then another hungry soul would take your place, hunched over the same battered tools, patching the same holes. Your name might linger on a few lips, usually in the form of complaint, but no one would carve it in stone. You know your station by the way you are spoken to and not spoken to. When the Lord passes you on the road, he does not see you, even if you bow. The priest nods with a tight smile, more to remind himself of his charity than to acknowledge your existence. The baker's wife is quick to scold you for tracked in mud, while her own son is allowed to upend a basket of flour with nothing more than a fond laugh. Even children sense your status. They beg you for scraps, but never for stories, and if you catch them staring through your window, they scatter like startled mice. Your apprentice, still young enough to believe in fairness, sometimes asks why things are this way. Why does the Lord's daughter ride a pony with a velvet saddle while you both huddle in rags on a straw pallet? Why must you bow and scrape for payment while the smith's son eats meat every Sunday and calls you rag picker as you pass? You tell him stories about hard work, God's will, the possibility of fortune's turn. But you see the question in his eyes, the same one you still ask yourself on sleepless nights. What is the point of a world where some are born to starve and others to feast? The social order is enforced with 1,000 silent rules every day. You must step aside in the street for anyone with cleaner boots and apologize if you brush their sleeve. You do not sit at the inn's main table, even if there are empty chairs. You crouch in the corner, nursing a single cup of watery ale, hoping the landlord will let you finish before sweeping you out with the ashes. When you enter the church, you stand at the back, eyes down, ears pricked for the whispered gossip that always seems to find its way to your doorstep. Did you see the tailor's hands, black as pitch? Probably a thief. His apprentice is a foundling, I heard. No wonder his stitches unravel. They say his father was a drunk. There is no rebellion in you. You have seen what happens to those who challenge the order. The tanner's cousin, locked in the stocks for shouting at the taxman. The old woman accused of witchery when her bread rose higher than the priest's. The beggar boy run out of town for stealing apples. You keep your head down, your voice low, your needs modest. You learn to find pride in small things. A straight seam, a satisfied customer, a meal that fills your belly, rare as those may be. Sometimes you witness kindness from above. The merchant's wife leaves a half loaf on your doorstep. The priest's servant brings a bucket of soup when plague stalks the village. The Lord's steward, after a good harvest, lets you keep a sliver of cloth. These gestures are not charity, you understand, but the maintenance of the order itself, a way to remind you of your place, to keep you grateful for crumbs. You accept them with a bowed head and a thank you, swallowing your pride along with the food. There are other tailors, of course, each guarding their own tiny slice of the social ladder. You know them all, by sight, by rumor, by the stitches you recognize on a stranger's coat. You nod at one another in the street, never quite friends, always wary of a customer lost or a secret stolen. There is no room for solidarity among the lowest, only a mutual recognition. We are not meant for more than this. At the market, you see the world laid out in tiers, the nobility circle above, untouched by mud or hunger. The merchants strut and bicker, measuring their worth by the weight of their purses and the cut of their coats. The farmers haul their produce, knuckles raw, backs bent, but with the pride of those who feed the village. You are barely noticed, a shadow, a function, another body to be stepped around. If you speak, your voice is lost in the clamor. Sometimes, on a lucky day, someone thanks you for your work or pays you without complaint. The feeling is so rare, so alien, that it leaves you unsettled, unsure whether to smile or to wonder if you are being mocked. More often, you are blamed for things beyond your control. A stitch that gives way after a drunken scuffle, a patch that cannot cover the shame of old poverty, a tear that widens because the cloth itself has given up. You do not hope for more. Hope is for those with something to bargain. You have learned to live with less, with humility, with silence, with the knowledge that your worth is measured only in what you can produce, never in who you are. You tell yourself that humility is a virtue, that service is noble, that perhaps in another life you will be born to softer hands and softer beds. But for now, you are a tailor at the bottom of the world's ladder. You know your place, and you cling to it as tightly as you cling to your few tools, your patchwork dignity, and the cold comfort of survival. If you listen to the church bells, you might believe that holidays are special, marked out on the calendar by God Himself, sprinkled across the year like crumbs from a Lord's table. But if you are a tailor, you know the truth. Holidays are just another day, another excuse for the powerful to parade, for the merchants to haggle, and for the poor to labor even harder under the guise of celebration. No saint's day, no festival, no holy season ever delivered you from needle, thread, and the endless roll call of wants from people richer than yourself. The calendar is a wheel that turns, grinding you beneath it. The village priest proclaims the coming of Easter, Pentecost, and Christmas with lofty words, while the nobility and merchants slip into their finest, and the whole square fills with a clatter of church processions and children's laughter. You stand on the edge, always on the edge, waiting for the same faces to turn to you with the same urgent needs. Tailor, my gown must be altered for the feast. Tailor, my son tore his best hose playing at nights. Tailor, the Lord Himself wants His sleeves longer this year. You do not get a holiday, you get overtime. You have long ago ceased to look forward to festivals. For every bright banner raised above the square, You see another mountain of work appear in your workshop. The days before a major feast are the worst. Customers swarm your door, each convinced their business is more urgent, each with a purse just light enough to insult your skill, but heavy enough to tempt your hunger. They drop off garments encrusted with old food, sweat, and a year's worth of neglect. They expect miracles, frayed cuffs made whole, moth eaten doublets resurrected, and the impossible mended with nothing but your own ingenuity and will. Your apprentice eyes the mounting pile with horror, asking, "How will we ever finish?" You only shrug. You always finish, somehow, at a price measured not in coin, but in hours stolen from your sleep. The night before a feast, your candle burns low as you patch, sew, and curse your fate, hands trembling from exhaustion, the only music the sound of your own heart thumping behind your ribs, and the muffled shouts from drunken revelers already starting their holiday in the street. If the feast is especially grand, the Lord may send for you, never to invite you to the table, of course, but to stand in the freezing entryway while his steward flings you a ragged cloak and asks if it can be freshened up. You nod, promising the impossible, then hurry back through the throng of villagers, clutching someone else's finery, your own stomach empty, and your mind calculating how much bread you might get for your labor, if, of course, they decide to pay at all. On the day itself, the village transforms on the surface. There are colored ribbons and banners, the sharp smell of roasted meat wafting through the streets, laughter and singing from the churchyard. For an hour, even the poorest wear their best, usually thanks to your stitches, though no one mentions that. Children chase one another in circles, muddying their newly patched breeches, while their mothers shoot you apologetic glances, promising to bring them by for repairs after the holiday. You nod and keep your opinions to yourself. You are too busy to join the games, the songs, or even the prayers. Someone always needs a button fixed, a seam let out, or a stain hidden. And then there are the emergencies, the sudden rip in the Lord's surcoat as he mounts his horse, the wine-soaked hem of the merchant's wife's best gown, the choir boy who splits his tunic mid-hem and is marched to your shop, face aflame with shame. They all come to you, breathless, demanding, offering gratitude or grumbling, or, if you are truly unlucky, nothing at all. You watch the festivities through the warped glass of your window, a silent spectator to other people's joy. Once, when you were young, you tried to join in, a game of ball, a dance at the edge of the crowd, a bite of pie snatched by a kindly hand. But you learned quickly that your place is not among the merrymakers. You are too ragged, too tired, too obviously the servant. Now you stay behind your workbench, letting the noise and color pass by, working by the flickering light until the last bell tolls. The only difference between holiday and ordinary day is that on a holiday, the village is louder and drunker, and you are even more invisible than usual. The food is better, somewhere else. The wine flows somewhere else. The blessings are counted, by someone else. Your meal is whatever is left, usually scraps brought by your apprentice or the remains of a crust, perhaps sweetened by the faintest memory of festival air. By nightfall, the streets are littered with evidence of celebration: broken cups, trampled bread, a dropped ribbon, or a torn garland. The laughter has faded, replaced by the groans of the sick and the snores of the lucky. You clean your workroom by the meager light of your candle, sweeping up the extra bits of thread and the mud tracked in by urgent customers. Your back aches, your eyes sting. Another holiday is over, and the next one looms on the horizon, already demanding your labor. On the rare occasions when you are given a gift, a scrap of meat, a heel of bread, a swallow of wine, you receive it with thanks, knowing that for you, charity and festivity are the same thing. You eat quickly, not savoring, but surviving, and when your apprentice asks if next year will be better, you only smile and say, "We shall see." But you both know the answer. The wheel will turn again, grinding as ever. It is only after the village is asleep, after the last torch has guttered out, that you allow yourself a small, private celebration. The taking off of your patched coat, the stretching of your tired limbs, the sinking into sleep with the hope, faint and fragile, that tomorrow the demands will be just a little less. But holidays or not, tomorrow you will rise, pick up your needle, and do it all again. For a tailor, there is no true holiday, only another patch, another plea, another day indistinguishable from the last. Pain is as common as dirt in your life, and sickness as regular as the chime of the church bell. For the medieval tailor, suffering is never a surprise. It is the background music of every day, a relentless, tuneless drone that shapes your hours and shortens your years. You wake most mornings with a nose already running and a throat so raw it feels like you've swallowed a handful of splinters. The cough that started in autumn has lingered through winter and into spring, a loyal companion. Your chest rattles when you breathe deeply, which you try not to do. Some days your voice is little more than a rasp, and on others you lose it altogether, reduced to hissing at your apprentice and hoping he can read your scowls as clearly as your words. Your hands are always in pain. The skin is cracked and red from cold, each knuckle swollen from years of gripping needles, shears, and rough fabric. Every new cut is another path for infection. If a splinter lodges under a nail or a nick on your thumb turns red and angry, you watch it with growing dread, knowing too well how a tiny wound can fester. The word sepsis is unknown to you, but you know the look of a hand turning purple, the fever that follows, and the way people disappear into their beds and do not get up again. The aches in your back and shoulders are constant. The low stool where you work has shaped your spine into a question mark, and the endless bending and twisting leave you stiff and brittle. Each morning you spend a few moments simply straightening out, feeling the vertebrae grind and pop, wishing for a warm bath or even a cushion. You stretch as best you can, but you know the ache will return before you've threaded your first needle. Illness is everywhere. The village is a breeding ground for every pestilence that can survive in the muck and filth. Colds and fevers sweep through with each change of season, thinning the old and the young. Your apprentice brings home every sniffle from the street, and soon you both are sneezing and coughing over your work. No one thinks twice about it, unless the cough gets deeper, the fever higher, and the patient begins to talk nonsense as they sweat through the night. Then the neighbors begin to whisper about evil spirits, bad humors, or worse. Sometimes the sickness is not yours, but a customer's. The Lord's man arrives at your door, pale and trembling, asking if his master's clothes can be ready sooner because the physician has forbidden him from leaving his bed. The next day, the bell tolls for a death, and you see black cloth appear on every arm. In these times, you work faster, hoping your hands are steady enough and your lungs strong enough to outlast whatever miasma floats through the air. And then, of course, there are the true horrors, diseases that travel with the merchants or arrive on the wind, whispered about before they ever show their face. The plague is the name spoken with a shudder, the black shadow that falls every few years, thinning the streets, emptying homes, and leaving you and the other survivors looking older, more haunted, more afraid of every cough. When rumors of plague reach the village, you scrub your hands with what soap you can find, keep your apprentice home, and pray. You know it will not help. The sickness moves as it pleases, and neither prayers, nor potions, nor any amount of needlework can keep it at bay. You remember the last time it came. The air was thick with the stench of burning herbs. The church bells tolled without end, and carts rolled slowly down the street, piled high with bodies wrapped in old blankets and rags you once mended. The market was silent, doors barred, and the only sounds at night were the cries of the dying and the frantic prayers of those still living. You stitched shrouds for neighbors who never paid, sewing quickly and without hope, knowing your own turn might come before the thread ran out. Even in less apocalyptic times, pain and sickness shape your days. Toothaches are constant, rotting stumps throb and ache, keeping you awake at night, making every bite of bread a trial. You know the stories about the village tooth puller, but you would rather keep your aching teeth than trust your jaw to his iron tongs and uncertain hygiene. Most people lose half their teeth by your age. You count your own and know you will join them soon enough. The local healer, when you can afford her, brings poultices that stink of garlic and old sweat. She will tie a bit of rag soaked in something foul around your wound and mutter a prayer. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes you think the ritual is mostly meant to comfort, a distraction from the helplessness of poverty. For real medicine, you would need coin, and even then, there are no miracles for men like you. Sickness is the Lord's way of culling the weak, or so the priest says from his well fed pulpit. In the workshop, sickness brings more than pain. It brings anxiety. If you are too ill to work, there is no one to step in. The apprentice is no master, and the pile of repairs grows higher while your strength wanes. A day spent abed is a day's wage lost, and more often than not, you drag yourself to the bench, shivering and sweating, trying not to cough blood onto someone's best shirt. You are used to the constant background ache, the endless cough, the slow rot of teeth and bone. But there are moments of sharper fear when the fever climbs too high, when your fingers go numb, when your apprentice's eyes are glassy with heat, and you wonder if he will survive the week. You hear the priest's words in your head about suffering, patience, and the promise of reward in the next life, but you cannot help but think a few small blessings in this one would not go amiss. Sometimes you wonder how you endure it, how anyone endures it. There are days when the pain is so sharp you want to scream, but you do not. You swallow it, stitch it into the seams of your work, let it shape your world without ever naming it out loud. You know that to live is to hurt, and to hurt is to live. You watch the healthy with suspicion, knowing that their time will come, that the wheel of fortune spins for all. When a wealthy customer grumbles about a sore finger, you smile and nod, hiding your own cracked hands behind your back. When a merchant's child sneezes in your shop, you count the days, knowing the fever will soon follow. At night, you lie awake and listen to your own ragged breathing, wondering if this is the illness that will finally take you, or if you will wake in the morning ready to fight through another day of pain. There is no answer, of course, only the certainty that sickness and pain will be waiting, as faithful as hunger, as constant as the cold. For the medieval tailor, life is a contest with suffering, and the only reward is to endure longer than the last thread in your sewing box. You close your eyes, mouth dry and bones aching, and hope, without much hope at all, that tomorrow will bring less pain than today. Blood, sweat, and tears. People like to use these words as metaphors for hard work, as if they are something heroic or noble. For a tailor in the medieval world, they are not metaphors. They are the literal currency of every day: stains on your sleeves, salt on your brow, and damp patches on your pillow. Your work is soaked with them, as is your life. You begin each morning with hands already bandaged, or at least wishing they were. A tailor's hands are his livelihood, but no one warned you how quickly they would turn against you. Every finger bears scars from old slips of the needle, rough calluses from too much sewing, the odd welt from catching a knuckle on a sharp edge. Your nails are cracked and blackened with dirt, the pads of your fingers so numb from old injuries that sometimes you prick yourself and feel nothing until you notice the spreading red on your work. Your tools are more like weapons than instruments of craft. The shears, dull and chipped, do not cut so much as crush, requiring every ounce of your strength and leaving your hands aching. The needles, bent, blunted, each one a little different, are constant threats. It is nothing to jab your thumb so hard that blood wells up and spatters onto the fabric. You have learned to ignore the sting, to keep sewing with a dirty scrap of cloth pressed to the wound, praying the customer does not notice the extra dye in their newly mended tunic. Sweat is your companion from dawn until far after dusk. It collects in the hollow of your back, drips from your brow into your eyes, and soaks the waistband of your trousers, leaving rings of salt behind. In winter, sweat chills you to the bone. In summer, it stings old cuts and makes your skin itch. The smell of it blends with the stench of unwashed wool, old shoes, and your own anxiety, a perfume you cannot wash away. Some days, you spend as much time tending injuries as you do sewing. A needle through the nail, a deep slice from the shears, a thumb crushed under the edge of your own workbench. Each one is a small disaster, a reminder that in your world, even the smallest mistake can cost you dearly. You have watched friends and rivals lose fingers to infected wounds, seen a man die from a scratch that festered until the whole arm went black. When you cut yourself, you worry less about the pain than about what happens if you cannot work tomorrow. Tears come in private, if they come at all. You cannot afford to show weakness in front of your apprentice, the customers, or even your fellow tailors. The world expects endurance, and so you provide it, bottling up your frustration, your pain, your fear. When the day is over and the candle burns low, you sometimes sit with your head in your hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Then you wipe your eyes, clean your face with a filthy rag, and get ready to do it all again. Sometimes the injuries are not so minor. A bad fall from the stool, a slip with a blade, a piece of wood dropped on your foot. These can leave you limping for weeks. If the hurt is bad enough, you may lose a day's work, which is another kind of wound, cutting deeper than any knife. There is no help for you, no guild to offer relief, no neighbor with the time or means to spare. You wrap the wound, grit your teeth, and keep going. And there are worse troubles. When illness sweep through the village, it is not uncommon to find yourself stitching a burial shroud for someone you spoke with only days before. Sometimes the person is your customer, sometimes your neighbor, and sometimes a friend. You work quickly, not just out of respect for the dead, but out of fear for yourself. Each death is a reminder that you are never more than one bad week from being on the wrong end of a tailor's needle. Accidents can bring ruin. A fire in the next room, a collapsed roof after a night of heavy rain, a sudden visit from bandits who take your tools and leave you with nothing but fear. You have seen it happen. You have helped pick through the ashes, searching for a scrap of metal, a bit of cloth, anything that might mean a new beginning. More often than not, there is nothing left but tears. Sometimes it is not you who bleeds, but your apprentice. He is clumsy, young, and stubborn, qualities that almost guarantee a lifetime of small disasters. You bandage his hands, clean his cuts, and scold him for not paying attention. But you remember being that age, too proud to admit weakness, too eager to prove yourself. You teach him as best you can, knowing that every lesson is paid for in blood. The pain is not just physical. There is a deeper ache, a dull throb in your heart and mind. You feel it when a customer insults your work, when the market is empty, and your purse is lighter than your stomach. You feel it when you remember the friends who are gone, the children you never had, the dreams you gave up for another day of patched sleeves and broken needles. This pain does not show on your skin, but it is the heaviest burden of all. The world outside does not see your blood, your sweat, or your tears. They see only the finished seam, the neat patch, the garment returned just in time for the feast or the funeral. They do not ask how you managed, what it cost you, or what you sacrificed to deliver it. You are expected to endure, and so you do. At night, when the street is quiet and the only sound is the scratching of rats behind the walls, you count your wounds. You remember every cut, every bruise, every day you worked through pain because there was no other choice. You know you will do it all again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, until the last drop of blood has dried, the last tear has fallen, and you have nothing left to give but your memory. Such is the life of a medieval tailor, measured not in gold, but in blood, sweat, and tears. And always, always, the work goes on. You would think that after so many years, the weather might eventually grow tired of tormenting you, or at least offer a little predictability. But, like everything else in your life, it conspires only to keep you uncomfortable. In the stories the rich tell, the weather is a poetic device: gentle spring showers, golden autumns, snowy winters spent beside a roaring fire. For you, the weather is just another adversary, creative in its cruelty and relentless in its surprises. The workshop is your cell, and the world outside its shifting wall of misery. There is never a day when the elements simply leave you be. Each season brings its own flavor of torment, none of it sweet, all of it familiar as hunger and pain. Winter is, of course, the worst. It announces itself not with a postcard flurry, but with a slow invasion, a draft that slides under the door and finds every hole in the wall, cold fingers that work their way up your legs and into your marrow. Your breath hangs in the air above the workbench, a persistent fog, and you wake to find your water pail frozen solid. The fire in your hearth is a meager hope, damp wood, if you have it, that smolders rather than blazes, producing more smoke than heat. You sew with trembling fingers, shivering so hard that you prick yourself more often, cursing your numb hands and wishing for a miracle that never comes. You layers on every scrap of cloth you own: two shirts, neither clean, a patched vest that stinks of old tallow, a coat that might once have been grand, now moth-eaten and stiff. The apprentice is a bundle of rags, his teeth chattering so loudly you wonder if they might shatter. By midday, the light is so thin and gray that you squint just to see your own stitches. Sometimes you break for tea, a miserable, bitter thing made from herbs you found growing by the road, more a gesture than a comfort. You warm your hands over the fire, burning your skin just to remember what warmth is. Spring arrives as a muddy lie. The thaw means the streets become rivers of filth, everything slippery, sticky, and rank. The water seeps into your shoes, climbs your trousers, and settles into your bones. Rain is constant, drumming on the roof, dripping through the cracks, collecting in little puddles under your bed. The world outside is green, but it is not a hopeful green. It is a mold, a slime, a creeping dampness that spoils food and makes every surface slippery. Your workshop smells like rotting straw, mildew, and wet wool. Cloth takes forever to dry, and the air is thick with gnats. Your knees ache, your back aches, your head aches. Always something to remind you that comfort is for other people. Summer should be a reprieve, but instead it is a trial of a different sort. The sun bakes the roof tiles and turns the workshop into an oven. The air inside is thick and sour. Sweat pours down your face and arms, soaking your work until it is sticky in your hands. Flies descend in swarms, crawling across your skin, laying eggs in any bit of meat or cheese left out too long. The stench of the village rises with the heat. Manure, privy, the river gone sluggish and green. You and your apprentice fight for the spot by the door, just to catch a breath of air that is not already stale and hot. The candle wax melts, your thread sticks to your hands, and your skin prickles with heat rash. Every customer who enters complains about the heat, as if you control the sun itself. In summer, tempers flare, and in everyone's patience grows as short as the nights. Customers snap at you for delays, and the smallest mistake leads to shouting. The work goes slower. Cloth sticks to your fingers, needles slide out of slick palms, and the urge to simply strip naked and run to the river becomes stronger every day. Instead, you keep sewing, wiping your brow, and hoping for a storm. Autumn is a false friend. The first cool winds feel like salvation, but they soon turn biting, rattling the shutters and sending dead leaves scurrying through the cracks. Rain returns, and with it, a dampness that never truly leaves. The light dies earlier each day, and you work longer hours by candlelight, your eyes burning and watering. There is the promise of the harvest: apples, onions, perhaps a little grain, but these things rarely find their way to your table, snapped up by those with more money or more muscle. With every change in the weather, your body suffers. The cold brings chilblains and frostbite. The heat brings sores and boils. The damp brings rashes and coughs. Some mornings, you wake to find your hands swollen and stiff, or your joints so sore that it takes an hour just to rise from bed. Your apprentice fares no better, and you both mutter curses at the sky, knowing full well it does not listen. The work does not stop for weather. If the roof leaks, you sew under an umbrella of dripping rags. If a blizzard howls outside, you huddle closer to the fire and pretend not to notice your toes going numb. If the air is thick with the scent of rot and flies, you wave them away and keep patching breaches, wishing for a draft to clear the stench. There are days when thunder rattles the windows, and you must stop working to mop up rainwater with your last clean rag, knowing it will never dry before the next storm. You marvel at those who speak of the weather as a mild inconvenience, a conversation topic for market day. For you, it is a tyrant, one that shapes your work, your health, your sleep, and your very mood. You watch the sky as if it is a rival, always plotting, always ready to ruin what little peace you can find. When the wind moans at night, you wonder what new misery it brings. When the sun finally sets, whether through thick clouds or a haze of smoke, you and your apprentice count the aches and tally up the day's losses. You patch the holes in your own rags, wring out your socks, and pray the fire lasts until morning. There is no comfort, no sense of the seasons as something to celebrate. Only the knowledge that tomorrow will bring new weather, and with it, a fresh set of ordeals. As you finally lie down, aching in every limb, you try to remember a day when the weather was gentle, the air sweet, and your work easy. You cannot. The memory is as faded as the last patch you put on the landlord's trousers, thin, unreliable, and certain to come apart at the first sign of strain. But you do remember this: no matter how the weather changes, your work will still be there in the morning. The world outside may freeze, flood, scorch, or rot, but inside your tiny shop, the ordeal never ends. Fatigue is not just a feeling anymore, it is a state of being, the slow and steady erosion of body and mind, a second skin you cannot shed. In the life of a medieval tailor, exhaustion is the closest thing to a constant companion, more reliable than food, warmth, or even pain. Each day is a wheel that turns not on hope or ambition, but on habit, on the unbreakable chain of repetition. Your morning starts before the sun has done more than smudge the horizon. You rise from your straw pallet, limbs stiff, joints creaking, every movement accompanied by that familiar ache. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow, broken by the howls of dogs, the shouts of drunkards, and the gnawing hunger that fills your belly even in dreams. But dreams are rare. Most nights you collapse into a darkness so dense that it feels less like rest and more like temporary oblivion. You stumble to your feet and set about the daily rituals. Coax a feeble fire from the dregs of yesterday's ashes. Splash your face with water so cold it leaves your skin tingling. Check the workshop for leaks, pests, and anything gone missing in the night. The apprentice stirs, rubs his eyes, and groans. You both move through these motions with the vacant precision of sleepwalkers, barely speaking, saving what little energy you have for the hours to come. Work begins immediately. There is no grace period, no gentle easing into the day. A pile of garments waits, each one a story of someone else's trouble, a rip, a tear, a stain, a plea for help disguised as a job. You patch, you sew, you cut, you mend, all while hunger mutters at you from your gut, and your muscles protest every twist and bend. Your apprentice does his best, but his best is often undone by fatigue, his hands shaking as he threads his needle, his stitches growing crooked as his eyes water with exhaustion. The hours crawl by. Outside, the world stirs to life. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the bell from the church tower, the bark of dogs, the shrill voices of market sellers. Inside, there is only the scratch and snap of thread, the dull thud of your shears, the muttered curses when a stitch unravels or a needle snaps. Time loses meaning. Your only measure is the growing ache in your back and the shrinking pile of work until, inevitably, another customer appears and the pile grows once more. Meals are an afterthought. You eat not because you are hungry, but because your hands will not obey you if you do not. A crust of bread, a cup of weak broth, the odd piece of cheese so hard it threatens to chip what teeth you have left. You chew slowly, not out of pleasure, but because your jaw is tired and your mind is already drifting back to the next task. The taste is always the same, bland, stale, edged with the faint bitterness of fatigue. By midday, your eyelids droop, your hands begin to tremble, and your thoughts scatter like chaff in the wind. You force yourself to keep going. There is no time for rest, not even a few minutes to stretch your back or close your eyes. If you stop, even for a moment, the work will only pile higher. The apprentice asks if he might take a break, and you snap at him, not out of malice, but because you remember how it felt to want rest and know there is none to be had. Afternoon blurs into evening. The light fades, and you squint by the guttering candle, eyes burning, head pounding. Each seam takes longer. Each patch is harder to line up straight. Each movement a reminder that your body is older than you wish to admit. You imagine what it might be like to stop, to simply stand up and walk away from the endless cycle. But the thought is as fleeting as a breath. There is nowhere to go, nothing to do but work. Fatigue does not just live in your muscles and bones, it seeps into your mind. You forget things, where you set your scissors, which thread matches which garment, even the names of your customers. You repeat yourself, ask the same question twice, lose track of days and seasons. Sometimes you look at your hands and wonder if they are still yours, or just tools worn down by years of mindless labor. Even when the work is done, if it is ever truly done, you do not rest. There are errands to run, scraps to gather, food to beg or borrow or steal. There is wood to be chopped, water to fetch, rent to worry over, debts to count. By the time you stagger back to your pallet, the sky is black and the world is silent, save for the distant howl of wind through broken shutters. You lie down and stare at the ceiling, waiting for sleep, knowing it will not come easily. The worst of it is not the pain or the hunger or even the exhaustion. It is the knowledge that tomorrow will be exactly the same. You will rise before dawn, patch the same holes, face the same complaints, and collapse again with nothing to show for it but another day survived. The routine is endless, grinding, merciless in its sameness. Hope fades, ambition withers, and all that remains is habit, a dogged, stubborn habit that passes for survival. Your apprentice sometimes asks if it was always like this. You want to tell him there was a time when you dreamed of more, when you believed in the possibility of change. But you do not lie. Instead, you tell him the truth. The world is a wheel, and you are caught under it. The only thing to do is endure and hope that perhaps one day it will roll over someone else instead. Fatigue is your master, your shadow, your inheritance. It is in your blood, your bones, your very breath. You know it will never leave you, not until you leave this world behind. Until then, you will rise, work, and fall day after day, trapped in the endless, weary routine of the tailor's life. It would be an exaggeration and a cruel joke to claim that the life of a medieval tailor is entirely joyless. True, happiness is not a visitor you expect, nor even hope for, but every so often, in the cracks between hardship and hunger, something resembling satisfaction manages to slip in. These are not the grand joys of songs or legends, but the tiny, shabby victories that only those who have nothing can appreciate. You have, over the years, developed an eye for opportunity. Perhaps it is a curse, this constant scanning of the world for scraps, scraps of food, scraps of cloth, scraps of luck. The villagers believe you are clever, sly even, and they are not entirely wrong. Survival is a kind of craft in itself, and you have become a master of making do. Sometimes your small triumphs are nothing more than a handful of loose threads swept up from beneath a customer's cloak. You collect them, knot them together, and create a length just long enough to finish a seam when your own spool runs out. It is a pathetic magic trick, but when the alternative is a ruined order and a lost meal, it feels like conjuring gold from air. There are other tricks. You know, for instance, exactly how to cut a pattern so as to leave the least waste. When a customer is too fat for his breeches, you let out the seams and shift the panels just so, making him believe he has not grown at all. When a child splits her dress for the third time in a month, you stitch an invisible patch on the inside, hiding the mend so her mother believes you have woven a miracle. Each little deception, each hidden economy is a victory, if not for pride, then for survival. Some days you find a coin in the mud, a bent penny, nearly worn smooth but precious as a king's ransom to you. Or perhaps a tradesman in a good mood overpays by a sliver, too hurried to count his change. You pocket these windfalls with a practiced nonchalance, careful not to let your face betray the tremor of relief that shudders through you. A single extra coin can mean a day without hunger, a candle for the night, a cup of cheap ale to soothe your aches. There are days when you manage to keep a small offcut of fine cloth, a piece too small for your customer to miss, but large enough to patch your own rags. Or perhaps a button, dropped and forgotten, becomes the jewel of your own best shirt. The world is careless, and you have learned to thrive on its carelessness. Sometimes the joy is in something even less tangible, a sharp needle borrowed from another tailor and never returned. The rare instance when your apprentice finishes a task without you having to undo his work. The fleeting warmth of a sunbeam falling across your workbench, making the dust sparkle as if your misery had been transformed into motes of gold. You and your apprentice have developed your own language of survival. A sideways glance when a customer is in a generous mood, a conspiratorial smirk when someone tries to pass off a particularly filthy tunic as nearly new. When business is good, you share a crust of bread with the cat, whose loyalty is always for sale to the highest or the most consistent bidder. The cat, for her part, brings you occasional gifts, a dead mouse, a bird's feather, or, if you are lucky, a purr of approval. Every so often, the gods of fortune smile, or at least forget to frown. A festival brings a surge of customers, and you are paid, actually paid, for every order. A noble's child outgrows a coat, and you inherit it as payment, patching and resizing until it fits. For a few short weeks, you may eat every day, even if only the simplest fare, and the world seems a little less hostile. There is joy, too, in the rare moments of companionship. When the evening is warm and the work is done, you and your apprentice sit on the stoop, sharing gossip and stale ale, watching the world drift by. You laugh at the absurdities of your customers, the latest rumors of haunted mills or talking cows, and the endless parade of village scandals. Laughter, when it comes, is rough and raw, but it is laughter all the same. You find comfort in routine, if not happiness, then at least the satisfaction of a task well done. A seam so straight it could fool even the priest's wife. A patch so subtle it escapes the merchant's sharp eyes. A day's work finished before nightfall. These are the moments you savor, moments when, just for an instant, you are more than a machine, more than a pair of tired hands. And then there are the mornings, few and far between, when you wake without pain, when the sun rises warm and golden, and for a heartbeat, you can almost believe you are someone else, living another life in a world not ruled by filth, hunger, and fear. These mornings do not last, but you remember them. Hoard them against the long gray stretches when hope is a stranger. Survival is, in the end, a series of small victories, each one so minor that it would be invisible to anyone not trapped in your world. But you see them, you cling to them. They are your reward for persistence, your proof that you are not yet beaten. When your apprentice asks you why you keep going, you point to these moments: the coin in the mud, the bread shared with a friend, the finished coat that earns a grudging compliment. You tell him that joy is not a gift, but a trick, the art of noticing what others miss, of finding comfort in the scraps the world leaves behind. And when the darkness comes again, as it always does, you remind yourself, as long as you can still find these small joys, however fleeting, you are not yet lost. For the outsider, the world of medieval craftsmen is a brotherhood of the skilled and the sturdy, united in their struggle against poverty and the whims of the powerful. The outsider is, of course, wrong. There is camaraderie sometimes, a fleeting alliance over a shared grievance, a mug of thin ale, or a well aimed insult at the Lord. But more often, there is rivalry, suspicion, and a steady current of envy that binds you as tightly as it separates you. For a tailor, every other tradesman is both a neighbor and a threat. You know every other tailor in the village by face, by gait, and, most tellingly, by their stitches. You can spot their work in the marketplace, on the backs of farmers, and the arms of gossiping housewives. You take a certain pride when your eye catches a crooked seam, and you mutter under your breath, "That's Hobbs' work, lazy as ever." But pride is a dangerous luxury. The same eyes are judging you, noting every patch, every flaw, every shortcut taken out of necessity or desperation. The competition is never open. That would be too honest, too risky. Instead, it is a war of whispers and sidelong glances, of secrets half shared and advice doled out with a hidden barb. When you pass another tailor on the street, you nod, never too eagerly, never too cold. Your words are polite, but your thoughts are always calculating. Is he busier than you? Has he gained a new customer? Did you see the butcher's wife at his door last week? Or was it just your imagination? Every craftsman in the village guards his secrets. Patterns are hidden, measurements fudged, good cloth bought up in secret before anyone else hears of a trader's arrival. When a new tool appears, rare, precious, imported from the city, the owner shows it off just enough to inspire envy, then locks it away before anyone can so much as touch it. You have lost count of the times a spool of thread has gone missing from your own chest, or a pattern you designed turns up, oddly familiar, in the next stall over. Petty tricks are the currency of this invisible war. If a customer brings you a rival's work for repair, you exaggerate the faults, shake your head, and mutter darkly about shoddy workmanship and dangerous shortcuts. If a fellow tailor is laid up with fever, you might offer a sympathetic word in public, but in private, you see an opportunity, a chance to poach his customers, to secure a commission that might not come your way again. When the fever passes, he will do the same to you. Other trades are no better. The cobbler, jealous of your custom, will badmouth you to anyone with ears, claiming your repairs never last a season. The tanner hints that your work smells of rot because you skimp on proper cleaning. The blacksmith, who makes the shears you depend on, raises his prices a little every year, knowing you have no choice but to pay or do without. You respond in kind, whispering that the cobbler waters his glue and the tanner stirs dung into his best hides. Market days are a battlefield. Everyone is watching, everyone is listening, and every transaction is a skirmish. You set your stall just so, display your best work where it catches the most light, and greet customers with the right blend of humility and pride. If someone asks about a rival, you offer a neutral word. His work is respectable, I suppose, never too warm, never too cold. Too much praise, and your own purse suffers. Too much scorn, and you risk a reputation for spite. There are times, rare but real, when you must band together. When the taxman comes, or when a gang of thieves prowls the outskirts, the tailors and cobblers and smiths gather in the square, muttering oaths and promises of mutual defense. Tools are hidden, doors barred, and for a brief moment, you remember what it is to trust another. But these truces are always temporary. As soon as the threat passes, the old rivalries creep back in and the endless dance resumes. Apprentices are a particular point of contention. The poaching of apprentices, tempting away a promising youth with the promise of more food or a softer bed, is a crime everyone denies and almost everyone attempts at least once. You watch your own apprentice warily, knowing that the lure of a better shop or kinder master could spirit him away. You remember being tempted, too, as a boy, by the promise of an easier life and the shame of being caught daydreaming by your own exhausted master. Suppliers play their own games, favoring one craftsman over another, leaking rumors about shipments of fine linen or rare dyes. You must flatter, cajole, and occasionally bribe to secure the materials you need. If a rival beats you to the market, you may find yourself making do with scraps, cursing the day you let your guard down. And yet, despite the envy and the tricks, you sometimes find yourself almost fond of your rivals. There is a twisted camaraderie in your shared struggle, a bond forged in the fires of mutual hardship. You know that only another tailor truly understands the misery of sewing by candlelight, with fingers raw and eyes burning, or the fear of losing a customer to a single careless mistake. In your darkest moments, you wish them well, knowing that tomorrow you may be the one in need of mercy. There are stories, too, of tailors who join forces, pooling their resources to buy a rare bolt of cloth or to undercut the prices of a particularly arrogant merchant. These alliances are always temporary, lasting only as long as the threat, dissolving in a haze of suspicion as soon as the prize is won. Trust, in your world, is as thin as the thread you use for your cheapest repairs. When the day is over and the market stalls are shuttered, you walk home past the other craftsmen's shops, nodding in silent acknowledgement of another battle survived. You know that tomorrow the war will begin again, petty, exhausting, and necessary. Because in the end, there is room for only so many at the bottom, and you all know exactly who you are. If hunger and cold are the air you breathe, then the constant threat of the authorities is the foul wind that blows through every corner of your life. In the world of the medieval tailor, power always comes from above, and it always smells of fear, sweat, and cheap wax. Taxes, dues, and the looming shadow of the watchman form the dark spine of your existence, each one a reminder that no matter how hard you work, you are never truly free. It starts with the tax collector, of course. His visits are regular and unwelcome, marked by a cloying politeness that makes your skin crawl. He arrives with a ledger and a wax tablet, often accompanied by a constable whose face is set in the permanent sneer of a man who knows he will never be called to account. The collector's questions are always the same. How many garments this month? How much thread? Have you had any new commissions? You answer truthfully when you must, and creatively when you can. No one survives long by being entirely honest. Every coin you receive is already promised to someone else. There is the rent for your miserable room, the dues to the guild, if you are lucky enough to belong to one, the fee to the Lord for the right to ply your trade, and the church tithe for the salvation of your soul. If you are paid in goods, you must still find coin, trading cheese or onions for coppers at a loss, just to satisfy the ledger. No matter how many shirts you mend, you are always behind. The collector sighs, shakes his head, and makes a note. Perhaps next time you will be more diligent, Master Tailor. It would be a shame to lose your license, no? The guild, if it exists in your village, is another layer of torment. The master tailors form a little court of their own, more concerned with fees, fines, and their own petty privileges than with the welfare of their fellow craftsmen. If you cannot pay the dues, you lose the protection of the guild, a luxury at best, but even a tattered shield is better than none. To fall out of favor is to be declared an outcast. Customers fade away, suppliers forget your name, and other tailors eye your scraps with hungry interest. And then there is the Lord Steward, who arrives with a sniff, peering down his nose at your tiny workshop. You are late with your payment, he says, as if it is an accusation of murder. The roads must be maintained, the market square cleaned, the guards fed. You benefit from our Lord's protection, do you not? You do not argue, you nod, scrape together the last of your coins, and bow as he leaves, already calculating how many days until the next demand. But the worst, by far, is the watch. They patrol the streets in pairs, short swords at their hips, eyes always searching for trouble. Their boots leave muddy prints across your floor if you are unlucky enough to catch their attention. A missing chicken, a broken window, a fight in the tavern, any excuse is enough for them to poke their noses into your business. They ask about your customers, your neighbors, your apprentice. They do not bother with records. A word from them is enough to bring you trouble. If they catch you working late by candlelight, they threaten a fine. For safety, they say, though everyone knows it is only another shakedown. If a customer accuses you of cheating, they are quick to listen, slow to judge, and never on your side. Sometimes, late at night, you see them outside, watching your window, waiting for a reason to knock on your door. You keep your head down, your mouth shut, and your purse hidden. The church is another authority, less threatening, but no less insistent. The priest expects his tithe on Sunday, and though he speaks of charity and mercy, his hand is always out. If you miss a payment, your name will be mentioned from the pulpit, a warning to others. When plague or famine comes, he will pray for you, but prayers do not fill empty bellies. You do not resent him. He, too, answers to powers above his station, but you wishes sometimes for a little less scripture and a little more bread. Punishments are not rare. If you fall behind in your dues, the collector will nail a notice to your door, debtor. If you resist, the watch may come to confiscate your tools, leaving you with nothing. Worse, you might find yourself in the stocks, mocked by children, spat upon by neighbors who know all too well how easily they might join you. Prison is not common. Cells are reserved for murderers and rebels, but the fear of losing your livelihood is punishment enough. There are stories, always stories, of craftsmen who rebelled, who refused to pay, or spoke out against the steward. No one remembers their names, only that they vanished, sent to the Lord's lands for hard labor, or encouraged to seek a new life elsewhere. The village quickly forgets those who make trouble. You have learned to keep your head down, your hands busy, and your opinions to yourself. Sometimes the authorities turn their attention elsewhere, a bigger crime, a richer target, a festival to prepare for. You breathe easier for a few days, even laugh at the constable's jokes in the tavern. But the wheel always turns, and soon enough the demands return. More taxes, higher dues, a new law you must obey or risk everything. Your apprentice asks sometimes why you put up with it. Why not hide your money or refuse to pay? You smile at his innocence and shake your head. The world is a mill, and men like you are the grain. To resist is to be ground under, to lose even the little you have. You have seen too many men broken by pride. You will not join them, and so you keep records, however meager. You count and recount your coins, always a few short. You nod and scrape and pay what you can, hoping each time that you will not be pushed too far. You make yourself invisible, unremarkable, never giving the authorities reason to notice you more than necessary. In the rare moments when you do have a little extra, you hide it, buried beneath the floorboards, wrapped in an old rag, or pressed between the pages of a prayer book, not for wealth, but for survival. You know that in this world, security is not a matter of having more, but of losing less. You do not dream of justice. You do not expect fairness. You know your place, marked out by dues and taxes, enforced by the watch, sanctified by the church. Your rebellion is survival. Your victory is another week endured, another day the authorities pass by your door. You are a tailor, yes, but more than that, you are a survivor. And in this world, survival is the only power you can hope to keep. Evening comes early in your world, sliding in with a gray weight that settles over the village long before the last stitch is done. There is no sunset in the romantic sense, no blaze of glory, no golden light kissing the rooftops. Dusk is an act of surrender, a slow collapse of the weak daylight into a heavy twilight, the moment when every shadow in your workshop seems to grow longer, colder, and somehow more permanent. You finish your last seam of the day by candlelight, squinting as the wick gutters and the wax pools unevenly at the base. The workbench is a battlefield of scraps, tangled thread, blunt needles, a shirt sleeve stained with your own blood from earlier in the afternoon. Your hands are shaking, but whether from exhaustion, hunger, or the growing chill, you are not sure anymore. The apprentice has long since stopped pretending to be useful. He sits half asleep in the corner, head nodding with each dip of the flame. You look around at your shop, the scattered piles of rags, the battered chest with its meager contents, the tools that are more like relics than instruments. Everything is coated in a soft layer of dust, and the air smells of old tallow, damp wool, and the faint, inescapable staleness of poverty. You sigh, stretch your aching back, and count your remaining coins, already knowing the number will not be enough for tomorrow's needs. The village itself is winding down, the sounds outside your thin door growing softer but never truly silent. Somewhere, someone is still haggling in the dark, a latecomer to the market desperate for bread or firewood. A few children shriek in a last burst of play before they are called in to the warmth, such as it is, of home. The blacksmith's hammer rings out a few final times, each strike slower, more tired, as even the strongest arms yield to nightfall. You hear the soft, rhythmic chanting of evening prayers through an open window and realize, distantly, that you have forgotten your own again. You force yourself to clear the table, stacking what can be salvaged, brushing away the worst of the crumbs, chasing the cat from her perch atop your fabric pile. The apprentice stirs and rubs his eyes, mumbling something about soup. You both eat in silence, a thin broth, barely flavored, with a crust of bread so old you have to soak it to chew. You savor each mouthful, not because it is good, but because you know it might be worse tomorrow. Every meal is a small victory, every swallow a reminder that survival is the one tradition you have never broken. Afterward, you count your wounds, literal and otherwise. There is a cut on your thumb that will need binding, a splinter you should dig out if you have the energy, an ache in your side that has been growing sharper with every week. You try not to think about it. The body has a way of lasting just as long as necessity demands, and no longer. When the meal is over, you and your apprentice fall into the slow evening rituals. You check the door twice against thieves or the wind. You tuck away your tools, rolling your needles in a scrap of cloth as if that might keep them safe from rust or rats. You set aside a little water for the morning, although you know it will taste of dust and the bottom of the bucket. The cat settles in for the night, curled into a small, indifferent ball, content to share your warmth, but not your worries. Now, in the thickening dark, your thoughts wander to the future, that distant country you have never visited and never quite stopped fearing. What future is there for a tailor at the bottom of the world's ladder? Tomorrow promises more of the same, more patching, more bartering, more endless routine. You try to imagine what change would look like, but all you can conjure are different shades of the same gray. A new customer, perhaps, a slightly sharper pair of shears, if luck or charity allows. Maybe one day, a better room or enough bread to share. The apprentice, young enough to still believe in possibility, sometimes asks what you dream of. You tell him what he needs to hear: a fuller purse, a warmer coat, a world where stitches last and debts are paid. But in truth, you no longer dream much at all. Hope is a muscle, and yours has long since withered from neglect. Occasionally, you let your mind drift further, to escape, to adventure, to the fantasy of being someone else entirely. A merchant, perhaps, striding through distant cities, a scribe reading books by firelight, or even a lord with soft hands and a bed of feathers. The thought is so foreign it almost makes you laugh, except you are too tired and the night too thick for laughter. Instead, you remember those you have lost, friends who disappeared to famine, rivals who vanished in the wake of new taxes, apprentices who grew up and left for cities or battlefields, never to return. You wonder if anyone will remember you when you are gone, if any stitch you have made will survive the washing, the wear, and the rot. The world does not remember tailors, not really. You are the invisible seam in the fabric of other people's lives, always useful, never celebrated. And yet, as you blow out the candle and lie down on your straw mat, there is a kind of peace in the certainty of the dark. The future may be a narrow, stony road, but it is a road you know. You will rise tomorrow as you always do, mend what can be mended, and endure what cannot. You will count your coins, your crumbs, your aches, and you will keep going, not because of hope, but because there is simply no other way. The village sleeps around you, and you, for a few hours, join it. The world turns, the night passes, and the tailor's life resumes, gray, heavy, persistent, and never quite finished. At last, sleep. It is not comfort that welcomes you at the end of your day, but the slow, relentless pull of exhaustion, the kind of weariness that burrows beneath your skin and settles into your bones. The world outside your thin door slips into uneasy silence. The distant, muffled barking of a hungry dog, the hush of wind pressing against loose shutters, the drip of water from a crack in the roof. You keep meaning to mend. It all becomes a lullaby of sorts, monotonous and faintly menacing. Your bed is the same straw pallet you have known for years, flattened, itchy, and vaguely damp from the day's lingering cold. You share the small space with your apprentice, who mutters in his sleep and occasionally thrashes his arms, as if fighting the day's troubles all over again. There is no privacy, no soft blankets, no pillow to cradle your aching head. Instead, you wrap yourself in your patched coat, curl your knees to your chest, and hope the warmth of your own body will last until dawn. You feel every straw stalk, every knot in the floorboards, every bruise and bite and ache, and yet you are grateful. You have known worse: bare dirt, hard benches, a night spent under dripping eaves with only your arms for cover. It takes a while to surrender. Your mind insists on replaying the day's litany, the missed stitches, the grumbled insults, the coins counted and recounted, and still not enough. You try to calculate whether you can stretch the last of the thread for one more customer, whether there is enough bread to make it to the next market, whether the ache in your side is something that will fade or something that will stay. You worry about the roof, about taxes, about the threat of sickness, about your apprentice's future, and your own absence of one. But sleep is the one creditor you never refuse. You drift at first on the borderlands between waking and dreaming. You hear the cat settling with a heavy sigh in the corner, chasing away at least some of the night's rats. You hear your apprentice breathing, sometimes catching, sometimes turning into a brief snore or a soft whimper. The sounds of the village, creaks, sighs, the distant clatter of late night feet fade into the greater hush of night. If you are lucky, you do not dream at all. Blankness is the purest luxury. A few hours where there is no hunger, no cold, no customer demanding the impossible. But luck is fickle, and more often than not, your dreams are restless, threaded with anxiety and memory. You find yourself back at your bench, the thread always tangling, the needle always slipping. Sometimes, in the half dark of a nightmare, you sit at a table that stretches on forever, covered in mountains of ragged clothes that grow no matter how fast you sew. Sometimes you dream of food, a feast so rich your mouth well waters in your sleep, only to wake with a start and the taste of stale air on your tongue. Once in a great while, you dream of something gentler, a day when your hands do not ache, when the light in the shop is bright and warm, when laughter comes easily. You see yourself as a child, running through a field with no end, or as an old man, content and unhurried, watching the world move by. These dreams are rare, fragile things. You hold on to them as long as you can, letting them blur the edges of the night. But even in sleep, there is no real escape from your world. The straw mat is hard, the cold presses in from the floor, and you wake often, once to a cramp in your leg, once to the apprentice's elbow in your side, once to a leaking roof that spatters your cheek with icy water. You turn over, find a new position, try again. The body demands rest, even when the world does not allow it. For all its faults, sleep is still your only true refuge. It costs nothing, at least nothing but the day's exhaustion. No lord can tax it, no guild can take a cut, no customer can claim it for their own. You share it only with those who snore and with the shadows that move across your walls. It is the place where even the lowest peasant and the richest merchant are, for a few hours, equals, lost in their own silent battles, untroubled by status or labor or hunger. When the sky begins to pale at the edge of the window, you wake slowly, fighting the urge to sink back into the only comfort you know. There is a moment, a brief, weightless instant, when you have forgotten who and what you are, when the pain in your hands and the emptiness in your belly have not yet arrived to remind you. But memory is never far behind. The sounds of morning, roosters crow, footsteps in the lane, the low murmur of neighbors, call you back to your place. You rise, stretching every sore muscle, already dreading the familiar routine. The day will begin again, as it always does. Water to fetch, fire to coax to life, bread to gnaw, work to endure. You will sit at your bench, needle in hand, your apprentice at your side, the cat circling your feet, and the world turning just as it always has. But for a few short hours, sleep was yours alone. In that darkness, with your cares set aside, you remembered, if only faintly, what it means to rest, to forget, to simply be. And tomorrow night, when exhaustion once again presses you down and the village fades into shadows, you will surrender yourself to sleep's indifferent mercy and hope that the dreams, if they come, are kind. Because in the end, for a medieval tailor at the very bottom, sleep is the last and best refuge you have, and perhaps the only true one you ever will.